Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, IronRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiology and sports nutrition professor of about 15 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, dabble in boxing, everything. I do everything. And I also run the Barbell Open, Lift for Hope. Of course, my facility strength. Right now we got the Barbell Open going on, so it's always busy, man.
Right on.
Busy.
Hey, have you done anything with the boxing since?
Well, I just started back.
Okay.
That's about it. Of course, I separated the hamstring from my body like 6 weeks before I was supposed to box, so that kind of stopped that in its tracks. And no, I've just got a couple sessions back in, and it feels pretty good. The only thing that like aggravates my hamstring at all is like stomping movements, something fast that.
Right. Yeah.
And I think at this point it's more mental than it is something actually physically could happen, I suppose. But it's getting past that and just getting some strength back and
let me
like that.
Let me ask you this then. I mean, for guys that are power lifters, let's face it, strength athletes do such a huge variety of things for conditioning. Sleds and I guess you could yokes. I mean, whatever accessory stuff. There's lots of ways if you can drop the intensity. You can into out of the strength realm and into the cardio realm. Is boxing something that you would recommend to powerlifters just to be conditioned, or is this just a hobby?
No, I actually like it now, and I think it's going to stay around. It's not boring conditioning. I like it because I'm learning a skill while I'm getting conditioned. It gives me it's something besides just pushing a sled or
I hear you.
So, I'm actually learning, okay, this round is 1, 2s, 3s, and you got to try and work that out, and every single time you address the bag, you're trying to do it right, and then you have like a 2-second break and you do it again.
Right.
And then of course the sparring, I mean, there's that in and of itself is like, it's a lot more taxing than one would think if you've never done it before.
Right. Yep.
3 minutes of throwing your arms around and blocking other people's arms will tax the hell out of you. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's great. It's a great way to get conditioned, in my opinion. I'm not able to jump rope because my doctor. I did it a few times, and then I called my doctor to make sure it was okay, and he's like, "I told you not to run. Why the hell would you think you could do jump rope?" So I stopped that, and I do like ladder work. Keeping feet low to the ground but moving them fast. Just trying to get speed up and things like that.
Right.
So yeah, I can't do a lot of the usual things you'd see boxing people do, like hours upon hours of running and jumping rope, which I'm okay with. But and as a heavyweight, yeah, probably not going to be running around that much anyways. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
But just getting your conditioning up to be. I mean, honestly, like from my first sparring match to now, and I'm probably worse now again, just good from the time off. Like just being able to hold your hands up that long wears the hell out of you.
I hear you.
I had to stop a few rounds in because it's like I'm just getting punched in the face. I can't hold my freaking hands up anymore.
No, right?
So
yeah, that's what you said about learning a skill in a progressive art. That's why I've always gravitated to martial arts. I mean, when I was younger, for 7 years I did Taekwondo very competitively, and like you said, sparring that really takes it out of you.
Yeah.
And later, with my son, we did kendo for a couple of years, and that's just, if you're not familiar, listeners, with, the bamboo swords and or wooden ones. But just like with you drop your hands, you're going to get rocked in the head,
Exactly.
And so that'll teach you to keep your hands up.
Yeah.
And I know Corey Van Wyk, he's been on the show before. He's doing some Taekwondo. I like the idea of skill acquisition because maybe it's something when you're older, you think about it more. I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of young guys that think about this too. But, right, just pushing and dragging sleds and things like that, it seems like other than the physicality of it, kind of a waste of time. I mean, as far as like a skill acquisition kind of thing. I mean, yeah, sure, you get better at it, I guess. But it's more purely fitness as opposed to something that you could pursue almost as a hobby or a skill while you're getting your conditioning.
Yeah, there's nothing to perfecting a sled push.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like, it's like literally left foot, okay, now right foot, you know. And but yeah, no, I mean I think it's a lot of fun. And it's much more a chess game than, you know, one would think if they've never done it. It's not a street fight, you know, and that's one of the things, you know, you learn is that basically you're facing an opponent within a confined rules, and you have to keep your head about you and not let, you know, you get a hot head and you're all of a sudden beat.
No, exactly. I hear
you're
you.
doing stupid things, you drop your hands or whatever, and you know.
That's a skill in itself, you know, like how can under maximal exertion can you still strategize?
Yeah.
That's something you got to learn, man.
Or
you know?
under maximal fist to face, will you keep your calm?
That's right.
And,
no, that's right.
You know,
ears
you
are
have
ringing.
to not go crazy. You know, I mean, that was one of our fears with my first sparring match was, you know, what am I going to do? Because outside of I've never been punched in the face within a sport that has rules. You know, so it's like, what are you going to do? Is he going to go berserk? You know, no, I didn't. I mean, I kept my head about me, and I better get my hands up. I thought they were up, but apparently not, because he just punched me in the face.
You're right. It's hard to control if you're an aggressive person, you know.
Yeah.
And you're in an environment where you have to allow that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, everybody. I've got one bit of science news, and actually fits one of the themes that we've been predicting. We're going to get a lot of attention, but you know, it is what it is. And then we'll talk about some industry things in the strength world coming up. In the topic, Phil and I are going to talk about old principles and ideas that still work and some that no longer apply. So, but let's get to the news here.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This first one, I got this through labroots.com. It's one of those, you know, science fetching kind of organizations, but it's called What Your Gut Feeling Is Really Telling You. This is by Kara Marker. She's just a science journalist enthusiast, and so sometimes I take this stuff with a grain of salt or go look up the article myself, but it says, your stomach growls and you think it's telling me it's time for lunch. However, it's mostly the brain that's responsible for sending that message. It says, with specific sections of brain tissue and specific neurons charged with dealing with hunger and satiety. And she doesn't go on about this a lot, but just a sidebar, the lateral hypothalamus, a part of your brain that's responsible for hunger, I always found this fascinating, that if you look at it anatomically, very close to the hunger centers are the rage and anger centers. And, you know, people talk about being hangry and that kind of stuff. And my wife can tell you I get salty and cranky if I'm hungry for too long. And I just think it's funny because you're stimulating that part of the brain, you know. But it says this unique and complex connection is also related to other sensations like love, fear, safety, danger. It says in a new study from Duke University, scientists unfold the mystery of the nervous system's connection to the immune system and its relationship to gut inflammation. And that's what I was referring to when I was talking about like the predictive type thing. Like gut, your microbiome, the bacteria in your gut are communicating with the rest of your body and influencing you. So it says years ago, Duke professor Alejandro Abele in his lab first discovered the immune nervous system connection. They were actually studying worms. And I know if you're thinking, oh, Lowry, please tell me about people. But they do this on purpose, right, in science, because, I don't know, these like nematode worms or whatever have like 300 neurons instead of 100 billion, you know, like people. So it helps them control things and reduce it down so they can kind of understand. So bear with me. They found that a small group of chemicals led to both an immune response and acted as dopamine antagonists. If you're not familiar, dopamine is sort of a feel-good neurotransmitter in your brain. Like the coffee research I look at, I actually test blood samples for dopamine because coffee is dopaminergic, right? And there's some very interesting interactions between some of those norepinephrine and dopamine and some of these hormone/neurotransmitter type chemicals that may affect the stretch reflex when you lift and stuff like that. So this even has peripheral relationship to sort of explosive lifting, I think, because of the dopamine connection, potentially. Anyway, it says, in a current study published recently in Current Biology, Abele sets out to break down the role of dopamine in immunity. The idea with a lot of this, of course, is they want to develop drugs and drug targets. I mean, that's where a lot of the money comes from to study this stuff. But then we can learn some good physiology about the inflammatory response and all that. So what they did was they gave the dopamine antagonist. So they're going to block this feel-good, often considered beneficial neurotransmitter, dopamine, and they're going to, it's a catecholamine, and they're going to block it with a drug called chlorpromazine. Now, I'm not familiar with that, but here's the idea. The worms that were treated with the chlorpromazine and blocked their dopamine, they saw an increase in resistance to infection. And then the flip side of that, when they gave dopamine to these worms, they were significantly more vulnerable to infection. Now, this is the first time I really thought about dopamine in a negative sense. Like, oh, wait, if I overstimulate dopamine, it could actually harm my resistance to infections and stuff, because nothing will shut down training like getting, nasty head colds or worse. And they also talk about the connection to the gut microbiome in this article. So it says the nervous system appears to be the perfect system for integrating these different physiological cues to keep the amount of damage in check. So, and again, it's just interesting to me that there are hormones that affect your immune system, and they're all also related to gut bacteria and how they communicate with the body. We've talked about that in past episodes as well. Hell, even testosterone. Guys that are taking testosterone, they respond differently to flu shots, for example, to immunizations. With the theory there being that testosterone apparently drives a lot of your physical resources toward reproduction instead of self-preservation and immunity. So anyway, so some interesting stuff in the news there, new studies about dopamine. And again, like I said, a lot of us, whether we know it or not, we're purposely stimulating our own dopamine with coffee and that sort of thing. And it may actually have a immunosuppressive effect and be tangentially related to the gut. So it's just so hard to tease all this stuff apart. In the old days, it was easy. Like, we had a chapter in school about the immune system. Then we had a chapter in school about, the endocrine system and all of your hormones, and then one on muscles, and then one on the digestive system. But the idea that these things are interconnected, it brings a lot of truth to the, sort of the holistic idea. Like, the mind-body connection is real, right? That's the, psycho-endocrine immuno system, that kind of stuff. So this stuff is related. Anyway, that's all I have. That's the only thing of interest to me that came across my desk. A couple of things coming up in the industry and just Iron Radio news, I guess. I am going to continue to put Iron Radio audio on YouTube. If you want to do that, you can go to ironradio.org, and there's a link. It's probably the easiest way to do that. Podcasting is obviously our main thing, but like I said, if someone wants to listen to it through their Xbox or their Roku or something in their living room while they're having coffee before they go to the gym, or even an app on a phone like a YouTube app or something, it's just another channel. And I mean, I really don't know how they do it. I'd love to see the variety and the number of servers that Google and YouTube have for this kind of crap, but I can't believe that they stream so much stuff to so many people at essentially no cost. Normally, like, we pay a server to host our podcast, and YouTube doesn't even charge for that stuff. So it's kind of a no-brainer. I've been meaning to move toward YouTube a little. So if you're interested, you can just Google Iron Radio, all one word, not separate words, because it's going to pull up a bunch of nonsense about iron or about radios. So make it just do a YouTube search, and you can find us on YouTube now. What else? I just did an interview with Men's Fitness on protein mixing, and I don't want to spoil any of that. Rachel there is very cool, and occasionally I'll do some stuff with them. But if you're interested, you can look for that. It is true, a lot of companies will make claims about mixing different kinds of protein and some of the benefits, and there's some truths. Some things mix well together. Other things, you're mixing stuff, and I don't think for much net gain. And what role does that play in inflammation and recovery and all that kind of stuff? A lot of confusion about protein out there. So, and then Phil, you got the barbell open in full swing.
Yeah, we got it. The Olympic lifting is done, so that finished last week, and then we started squat this week. We got a lot more people doing the powerlifting than the Olympic lifting, surprisingly, but I don't, it's all good. No matter what, we're just rolling with it. This is year one, so it's a building process. But no, it's going good at my gym. I know that a few of my guys crossed the 500-pound barrier for the first time, putting up their squats. One of my girls squatted last night 340 in just knee sleeves, no wraps.
Ooh.
So that was nice. Where her max in wraps was 355. So being able to hit 340 in sleeves is good.
Yeah.
I got a little 150-pound 16-year-old that squatted 365. So
now on film,
along. Yeah, it all has to be on film.
Right. Yeah.
So you have to film it, and basically what we're doing is you film it from the side so you can see depth, and then you film the weight on the bar, and then we immediately have to walk over and film body weight. So you kind of show everything in one unbroken piece of tape.
Unbroken, right? Yeah.
So, and next week after Sunday squats end, you still have time. Sunday night is when you have to have it in by, and you can still enter powerlifting until then. And then we roll into bench and then deadlift, and then from there we see where everybody stands and move on. So
how would one do this just with a phone? And the website they go to and all that, can you do that, just offer that real quick? Or
that's all we do is just a phone. So basically you go barbellopen.com. You have to register and create a profile. First thing, there's just a little button that says register. That's free. You create a profile. That puts you in the database. And then from there, you have to sign up for the sport you want to do, or both of them. So you go to the powerlifting button or the weightlifting button, hit it, and then sign up. It's $20 to sign up. And then basically you come back and sign in your profile, and then you hit the enter lift button. Pick which lift you're entering, which right now the only one you can enter is squat. That's the only one we have active. So you'd enter squat, you put in your body weight, you put in the bar weight, and then you put the link to your video that you hosted on YouTube.
So, I got you. I kept thinking, and I know you said this in weeks past, like, how do I get it off my phone onto your servers? But you're taking it out. You're making YouTube. I was just talking about how YouTube streams everything for free.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we're using it. And it's great advertising, because every lift pretty much says like 585 squat for the barbell open. So now it's all over YouTube.
Right. Yeah, marketing too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
good stuff.
We have all these people entering lifts for barbell open, and then then you just put the link, and then we're able to see it. So
that'll help, I think, for next year. Where like you're saying, like the first year, a lot of times it's like, let's get all the structures in place. Maybe not dry run, but let's, you don't want, it would be, it might be a problem you would want to have, but if you have 1 million people the first time out, servers crash, and
exactly.
And you run into things about maybe that you wouldn't have thought about until you run through it once.
Yeah, there's been little things on the technical side we've had to, geek out and things like that. So it's all good.
So the videos are good for the most part? They're not dark or too small or whatever?
No, we gave pretty clear instructions too. So, there's an instruction list of here's what you're supposed to do to film them. Here's where we want you standing, blah, 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 blah.
I think this is great for guys that just lift. They lift with a small group of buddies, and they don't feel like they're part of something bigger, and this would be your uplink to something bigger.
Yeah, exactly. And, it automatically puts you in a leaderboard that you can follow. Of course, everybody was freaking out because they're like, early in the week, they're like, man, I'm in first. Why are there only 3 people entered? I was like, and it's just explaining to them that basically you have all week to enter this. So like a lot of people in my gym, we will hit the lift on Monday, and then we won't submit the video because you can only submit once.
Right.
And we'll hold off and see how they feel like Saturday. And if they feel like they got more in them, we'll go again. And then we won't enter that lift until we've for sure. Basically, you have a whole week to put up your best lift, especially on the Olympic weightlifting side. That works,
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
So people are holding off till the last minute, and then Sunday, what you see is all these people dumping videos. So, and then that leaderboard's just changing like crazy.
Because it'd be really hard to do like a 700-pound deadlift, and then 2 days later,
I'm
just going to do that again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, but I mean, no, it's coming along good, and it's like anything new. I mean, we had a lot of this is amazing, and then they don't sign up, but then it's there, and they're like, I totally meant to sign up. Yeah,
right on.
Well, it's too late.
Right on. I'm glad. I'm really glad. One of the reasons I think IronRadio works is that we're linked, and I've said this the other day because a lot of podcasts don't do this. Is the link to your quote unquote brick and mortar place is very helpful. Because you have projects and athletes to work with. This isn't an entirely electronic, nebulous online kind of thing. There's real people getting involved.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Like
you got to see my place now too. It's totally changed. We moved into the bigger side. It's
I want to see it.
It looks good. So cool. Other than that, I don't know. We got lots of what America won. The gold medal or the medal drought is over in women's weightlifting. Sarah Robles won bronze.
Right on.
The Americans won. We have our first female gold medalist in wrestling ever. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she just won that yesterday. So
cool. And
then shot put. Ryan, I'm going to probably butcher his name, but Ryan Krauser beat the Olympic record, 73 feet 10 3/4 inches. To throw a freaking 16-pound ball. That's just
that's a long way.
Yeah. So and that's an Olympic record, but. Yeah, so it's been a fun Olympics. It's especially on the power sports side.
Yeah, the Olympics are good for strength and power. You just don't see it as much in sort of. I mean, maybe in football, but like football, baseball, basketball here in the States anyway, or even with soccer worldwide. It's power is not usually. I mean, power is important in all sports, but as the main event, strength and power. You almost wait every 4 years for something cool like this, except for like. The powerlifting or the Highland Games championships and stuff.
Yeah, so it's been neat watching some of that. And it's a good time. So
all right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's go to break. When we come back, we're going to talk about old ideas, ones that we still think work, and which ones no longer apply. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowery. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You can simply Google CRC Press and Lowery. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowery. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Hi, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowery, and on behalf of Phil and Rob, I'd just like to let listeners know that if you love us or you hate us, we'd like you to leave a comment or perhaps vote for us on iTunes. It helps us out quite a bit on the popularity side of things. You can also follow Dr. Lowery, me, on Twitter. It's Lawnman7 on Twitter if you want to do that. We also have a Facebook page, the IronRadio listeners page. So whether it's leaving a comment or voting for us or following us on Twitter or Facebook,
that would be fantastic. Also, occasionally Rob or myself will write an article for another website, and Phil will as well. So lots of ways to interact, follow us in other media, and vote for us, and keep things going strong on Iron Radio. Thanks.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more. That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everybody, we are back. We're going to talk about the good and the bad. What, just training modalities or nutrition stuff that, we think work, and some that didn't pan out, that are kind of still out there. So
yeah, and they are. Yeah, that's right. They are. And, I think about the Weider principles. Anybody who's old enough to read the old Muscle and Fitness and the Flex magazines, Joe Weider, he sort of just adopted, and now everybody does this. How many people remarket known concepts as their own? I've even made that concept about lots of what CrossFit does. But
yeah,
the Joe Weider principles are a great example of that, like the muscle confusion principle, or the there was dozens of them, and most of them were just textbook real principles that he just attached his name to for marketing the magazine, I guess. But yeah, so what do you have?
Man, I can tell you one that works that people always just often forget about because it's so simple, is just simple progressive overload. It's been around forever, but it works. I mean, especially early on. You do a weight that's not going to kill you, and then next week you add 5 pounds. The next week you add 5 pounds again. Over time, you're getting stronger. I mean, if you just simply progressively add a little bit more, a rep here, a pound there, you end up getting better. And I think a lot of people move away from it because it seems so simple, or a lot of people, progressively add too much. They're like, oh, I did 135 this week. That was super easy. So I'm going to jump to 175. They jump 40 pounds instead of jumping 5 pounds. And the whole idea is that you don't start off at a load that kills you, but by the time you get to a load that would have killed you, you're now stronger. So it's not a load that, if you're able to keep it throttled back a little bit and progressively get higher, by the time you get to that load that would have crushed you, you're now stronger. So I think that's where a lot of people mess it up.
Yeah, I think across the like a macro cycle of, like, let's say a year, even if you periodize, I mean, nobody's saying endless linear periodization, especially like you were saying, if at the same pace, like 5 pounds every week, I'm just going to do it.
Yes.
But you're right. People get so into the undulating periodization and deloads and all this stuff, is at the end of that year, you should really be lifting, a lot more. Frankly, you've had a year, unless you're really advanced, then you might go a whole year and only have 10 pounds added to your major lift or something. But I think about that story of Milo. This is a Greek tale, I think, thousands of years old. He carried the calf, I don't know where, to work every day or something. And I'll have to go look this up. People might correct me, and as the calf grew, he really didn't notice it because it added a few ounces every day, and by the time the end of the story, he's carrying a full-grown bull back and forth. That's progressive overload, and that's thousands of years old. That's a good one. You're right. I think people forget that. It's it's really the crux of everything we do.
Yeah. It really is at the base. You're adding, and then the thing is over time, it can be a little different. You can add a pound, you can add a rep, you can add a set. You can, there's many ways to play with it.
To overload.
You're still, just very in a small incremental fashion overload. So
yeah, we did a whole episode a while back on all the ways to overload. Right? There's tons of ways to overload. You can overload frequency. Go more days a week, and overload volume. The classic one, of course, though, is overload intensity. Put more weight on the bar. So when it comes to things that work, I think a lot of the old stuff that I would read in old muscle magazines or even before, and Bill Pearl has a great book about the history of resistance training and bodybuilding and stuff. It's one of my prized possessions. I have a signed copy from Bill. But a lot of those things have become training principles, and they're in textbooks, and these things are real, and they're always going to be real, like progressive overload, like you just said, or, we've done whole episodes on training principles, individual ones, like the reversibility principle, use it or lose it. If you stop lifting after a couple of weeks, you're going to start to atrophy, or lose strength, or, diminishing returns. We just touched on that a second ago. As you become more advanced, closer to your genetic ceiling, you can't expect to keep putting 20, 40 pounds, on your squat every 12-week training cycle. That kind of stuff. There's diminishing return. So there's lots of, I think, those types of things that have become textbook principles, and they're just sort of truths, right? Hence principles. But let's talk about, just for fun, some of the stuff that hasn't panned out, because there were things that floated around in the bodybuilding magazines in the 80s, and we, just out of ignorance, we didn't know. But then there were authority figures, like even Bob Kennedy, from Muscle Mag International. Rob would know a lot more about that because he worked there forever. Or a lot of the big magazines, they would espouse certain things, and I think science has just sort of debunked them. But I'm sure you've got some things on the strength and power side.
Oh, yeah, definitely on the strength side. The first one that comes to my mind is the whole, you should crush yourself at every workout. Basically, you should be dragging yourself out of the gym by your fingertips when you're done of every workout, or it's not a good workout. You need to go in there and just kill yourself. And that works at the beginning for sure. When you're, the thing about beginning lifters is it doesn't take much to kill them, but it also doesn't take much for them to recover. So that injury recovery phase is very short. But the problem with that is if you keep that mindset too long, eventually all it leads to is just overwork and injury. You have to get to a point where you're pushing it hard enough to make progress, but not hard enough to just leave yourself beat up. So you don't need to just kill yourself every workout. You need to go in there and go hard, but hard enough that you can still walk. Because once somebody's advanced, if you do, you literally reach a point where you do enough work that you're hurt. And
you hurt
or
yourself.
Injured. Yes.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So
I think that's especially true of middle-aged people. I think women might be a little more resilient. As the decades move on and more women get involved, it might be because of the protective effect of estrogen and that sort of thing. But there's no doubt. Definitely me as a man, and I'm betting a lot of women too, you get strong enough to hurt yourself. You're right. You're right. You just do.
Yeah. On the opposite end of that, I think this came out as a backlash to that, no pain, no gain mentality is the whole, you should feel better when you leave the gym than when you came in. And that also is bullshit. Basically, if you feel better than when you came in, you didn't work hard enough. So it's that fine line. You need to find that point where you go in and, work hard enough that you actually stimulate a response, but not hard enough that you kill yourself. It's somewhere in that middle zone. And that's usually, in my case, you're leaving a rep or two in the hole, not 10.
That's hard to do, actually. Don't you think?
Yeah,
I think it may be more of a problem, and you may have alluded to this earlier, but with the bodybuilders too, because there's always that hyperbole in those muscle magazines. Tear yourself up, destroyed. Yes. Appetite for destruction, and with the stimulants and everything, and they confuse intensity, which to an academic is literally weight on the bar. Percent of your 1 rep max, we'll say, with supersets and giant sets and exhaustion and. A lot of that stuff I think was even perpetuated. Like if you watch Pumping Iron, Arnold's like, the champions are the one who can get the 9th and 10th, 11th and 12th rep.
The body is not used to maybe the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th rep with a certain weight. So that makes the body grow then, going through this pain barrier. experiencing pain in your muscles and aching, and just then go on and go on and then go on. And this last 2 or 3 or 4 repetitions, that's what makes actually the muscle then grow.
And that's, in some ways that's true, but like you said, it leaves people with this mentality that unless they crawl out of the gym, they've wasted their time. And I think powerlifters are more calculating.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing we're looking for, too, is that it's the importance of every rep. You know, we don't want any rep to look bad. And usually if you're going to that point of exhaustion, like rep 1 through 5 look great, and then rep 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 look like crap. Half of your reps look like shit now. You know, we don't want that.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking to practice, you know, as close to perfection as you can. Perfection's not going to happen all the time, especially when heavy loads happen. But we're aiming for it. You know, and I have people shut it down when they can't hold form. You know, it's from there it's dangerous. And you know, that's not to say that. I think another big one is, you know, never train to failure, and that is true, but it's also BS at the same time. You know, I don't want you, like, if one of my guys can squat 800, we're not going to go 600 and see how many you can do to absolute failure. You know, and very often, you know, we might do it for fun, just, you know, as a bet or something. But
oh, right, it is fun, yeah.
But you know, not as a training principle.
No,
you know, there's too much at stake. You know, it's way too easy to get hurt in a case like that. But, you know, at the same time, there's nothing wrong with, you know, getting down and doing a couple sets of push-ups to just absolute failure, or doing a couple sets of chin-ups to absolute failure. It's not going to hurt you. You know, you're using an exercise that has a very low injury rate, and you're just pushing it as hard as you can.
Right. It's sort of an accessory movement.
Yes. I mean, and a lot of those moves, I think you should. I mean, those are the ones that I tell people we train those like bodybuilders.
Yep.
Just grab that 95-pound bar and row it as many times as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, that's what I get a lot of crap, because on the board it'll say, like, rows, some for a lot. So what does that mean? Well, just what it says. Do a few for a lot of reps and call it a day. You know, just get up there, grab a bar with something on it that's reasonably hard, and show me how many you can do, and do that 2 to 4 times.
And, you know, that's funny. That's against the calculating nature of the power lifter, because, you know, they want numbers and progression models. It's like, that's not the goal.
To them.
Right, that's not the goal here. You know,
it's like, just do some work, you know?
Yeah.
Do some hard work and call it a day. That's all we're looking for on those. Now, on your competitive moves and things like that we're actually looking to progressively get better on, we have exact calculated numbers. I want you hitting these for this many sets for this many reps, and they all need to look good. You know, but that assistance work, it's like all you need to do is don't overthink it. Just get hard work in, and if you consistently get hard work in, you're going to get better. So
right. I'll tell you another principle is specificity, something that we've talked about before, and it's kind of what we're talking about here in a way. Like your main lifts, a power lifter is going to look at a squat different from a push-up, you know, and so. But you got to balance a lot of these things too. Like if there's too much specificity, and I know there are some people who just really like to focus on the main lifts and they don't do as much accessory work. Some people are all about tons of, you know, speed work and accessory movements and that kind of stuff, but at least from my perspective, I think there's got to be a balance there. You know, too much specificity, you can end up with overuse injuries and that kind of stuff, diminishing returns, burnout. But if there's too much variety, I mean, let's face it, what do powerlifters do? You do 3 lifts, you know, when it comes right down to it. And if you're futzing around with push-ups and sleds and reverse hypers and all this other stuff all day, and you never squat or deadlift or bench, I think you're screwed. You know, so I think some of these principles they're two sides of the same coin, like specificity and variety, don't you think?
No, I agree 100%. I mean, there's time for both. And, you know, we kind of make that time depending on when your meet is. You know, it's especially as you get, honestly, I mean, I think your more advanced lifters need a little more variety at times, you know, when they're away from a meet. But honestly, you get in those last 4 to 8 weeks towards a meet, what do you need to be doing? You need to be squatting, deadlifting, benching. You know, that's what we're here to do. So we need to get really good at those. You know, in the off season, if you will, you know, there's some unilateral work and some more of this work, and, you know, you're filling in the gaps because, I mean, your hips will start to hurt. You'll get locked up. You get overuse injuries. It's good to work your system in a little different way to give it a break from that.
Yeah, I think some of the guys that are big proponents of the minimal variety, and this may not always be the case. And again, people can write in, go to IronRadio.org and send me a nasty email. But would be some of the guys with huge joints. They got hands like catcher's mitts, and I just think they can take their skeleton can take that level of punishment. Where I think if someone's a little more ectomorphic, a little thinner, more angular, it's going to be harder for them sometimes. You know what I mean? To keep coming back to the heavy barbell squat every freaking session. They're just not robustly built enough. So you talk about time of the year, but how do you address that? Like differences in what people can take. Like the whole adaptation syndrome and stuff like that. Do you just try to say everybody's still going to stick to basically the same model, or do you take into account body shape or size differences, or how does that work?
Definitely. I mean, honestly, the most I see is where they're at is usually the difference. It's not so much how they're built. It's where they're at in their training. Advanced
training
versus
status.
not advanced. Like if I have a beginning person who's never done this stuff and they say they want to be a power lifter, literally we're going to spend 90% of our time squatting, benching, and deadlifting.
Yeah.
Because they just suck, and they need to get good at those before we add variety. By adding variety, our learning curve time is increasing because they just need more time doing those until they can do those very proficiently. So it's just or same thing with Olympic weightlifting. I mean, some of my weightlifters get bored because literally all they do is snatch and clean and jerk, snatch and clean and jerk, snatch and clean and jerk. Well, I don't need you doing a bunch of other stuff until we can snatch and clean and jerk correctly. Yeah. So we're going to work technique,
skill.
Technique. Once you gain that skill and you're very proficient at it, let's say you can do the right form 90% of the time despite the load, now we probably need to add some other stuff in to bring lagging parts up.
Right.
And that's what we'll address in beginners. That's what our other 10% of our time is used for in beginners is the reason your squats kind of sucks is because your hamstrings are weak. So, at the end, we're going to do some good mornings and some stiff-legged deadlifts, things like that. But still, most of our time is just spent on the main move. But then as they get advanced, I can't have somebody that squats 900 pounds do, 70% of 900 is, 630 pounds. Okay, you're doing 45 reps. No, I'm not.
No, that shit breaks down. That breaks right down.
No, I'm not doing that. So we'll hit our sets and reps, and it'll usually be a little bit less. And now, the rest of our advancement is done by doing other moves. They're already very proficient at that move.
Yeah, it's worth. That's really worth. And a gym like that, like yours, it's worthwhile to see some of the more elite guys because it's funny to listen to people in the strength world, strength conditioning and stuff, and they'll talk about, well, you want to spend most of your time in the 90% range and this and that. And I'm like, okay, great, but if you're pulling 800 pounds off the floor, you can't go do 720, right? 90% of 800. You can't go pull 720 almost every workout.
Yes.
It's that shit breaks down. I'm sorry.
Yes, and the only problems you run into in a place like mine is that a lot of times you'll see the beginning people in there, well, I want to do what he's doing. Well, okay, 10 years from now you can. It's making them realize you're not there, You're doing what he was 10 years ago. Give it time. You literally need to build that base of technique and strength.
Yeah.
Well,
let me let me offer a couple more things. One is when I mentioned body shape and that sort of thing in bodybuilding, that's part of my personal experience. Like if Fortress and I were about to start a 12-week balls to the wall, fairly heavy squat program, after about 8 weeks, my joints are hurting. Even if I'm even close to the loads that he's using, I almost have to go like a little bit briefer on the training. Like I'm not going to go 12 to 16 weeks in a training cycle. I'm going to fall apart, and I don't think Fortress would. Like I've joked before, but he's built like a refrigerator. He's as wide as he is deep as he is tall, and he's like a cube. He's so robust with that kind of stuff, and I think it's because his joints are big, his skeleton is big, and I think there's something to be said for simply a bigger skeleton bearing some of that load. I guess,
for sure.
But.
For sure. And I think, like you said too, I find a lot of my women can handle more volume than a lot of the guys can at any given strength level.
Yeah.
I think like it's a big, huge thing right now. The whole squat every day and this and that.
Yes,
and
right.
Push volume, and I think that stuff has its place. But like you said, it's in short doses. Like I have a squat program I have people do, but it's literally 6 weeks long. And by the end of it, they're like, I don't ever want to squat again. Well, good, because now we're going back to once a week.
Right.
And in short doses, it can work. The problem is you push that too long and you just start hurting. And so you give them a dose of that. We push it hard. Now back off. And I've had most luck with that. Like we push one thing hard for a short amount of time, 4 to 6 weeks. And then we don't stop that thing, but we back off that thing and we push something else. You can't raise everything up at once you're to a certain point. Like I have a girl that just like it was literally day 2 of ever doing lifting. She's in that fun spot where like literally every day she comes in, she's going to be stronger. In everything.
Right. What a rush.
But that time ends quickly. And you're just not going to get every lift to go where you want it to go at the same time once you reach a certain strength level, and you got to ID which one you want to work on the most and just hopefully maintain the others.
This is your quote. Your quote from years ago was, the man that chases 2 rabbits doesn't eat.
Yes.
Right.
And so I mean there's that.
Let me throw this one out to you. There are 2 things that used to float around in muscle magazines, 2 I think they call them training principles that I think are more dubious. One of them, and I think Bob Kennedy, of all people, actually sort of espoused this, but was the toxin buildup idea. Like you have to do lots of reps in order to grow. Like heavy weight, low reps, you don't build up enough toxins, you need to get that burning. And let me address this from sort of a modern science perspective. Yes, if you do a high enough repetition set, you're going to end up with more muscle acidity, that familiar burning sensation and that sort of thing. Whether or not that, I think it's mostly debunked. That's not what causes growth. I'm not saying there aren't that changes in pH in a muscle or like free radicals that get produced. Probably, part of the muscle remodeling process. But a lot of that stuff is sort of a combination of pathways that have now been better defined, like the mTOR pathway, the biochemical pathway that helps with muscle protein synthesis, or the meals that you get throughout the day, that stimulate some of these systems. Obviously, there's a weight training stimulus that's important, and that's what these guys used to wrestle with, right? They didn't know. They're like, well, you do something in the gym, and usually the guys who work harder get ahead better. But so, like we've said just a little while ago, too much stimulus, if you don't leave anything in the tank ever, that's not the best approach, Or like, for example, you do so many negatives, you do so much eccentric contractions that you're so sore you can barely move. I don't think you should do that every workout week in and week out for 4 months in a row. You're going to beat the hell out of yourself. That's an intensity technique.
Yeah.
But anyway, that sort of toxin buildup idea, it's just one of those things I remember from the 80s, and I'm like, I don't know. It was one of those nebulous things from people who have never really looked at biochemistry at all, and they're trying to come up with what's the trigger, and that kind of stuff. And like I said, there's some truth to the free radicals and probably even the drops in pH and stuff, but that almost makes it sound like you have to work a muscle until it's on fire, in order to induce growth. And that's not true. I mean, some of the work from guys like Nick Bird and Stu Phillips and those guys up in Canada and Chicago now, but 3 sets of movement, I think they're finding is close to optimal for stimulating muscle protein synthesis, right? So you might say, well, what, you're just going to do 3 sets of chest and that's it? Well, no, I think because there's multiple muscles involved in any given lift, or different angles, supporting muscles, assister muscles. But you know what I mean? That whole toxin thing I thought was kind of funny, because what did you just say? Powerlifters should be leaving something in the tank. So I don't think you guys are purposely focusing on generating toxic substances in the muscle as part of it's more of a nervous system, protein synthetic pathway kind of thing,
But I mean, we're also at times, and it depends on the athlete, at times we're literally we're always trying to put on muscle. I don't care what you're doing. Even if you're a light athlete that's in a weight class or a heavy athlete, they're all trying to put on muscle under, different circumstances. The light people are trying to put it on without gaining weight, but if we can change an ounce of fat, swap it for an ounce of muscle, not change it too, because that's impossible.
Sure.
But if we can swap that over time, great. But we're also, especially when you're weight class athletes, we're just trying to get more proficient with a heavier load over time.
Right. Yeah.
To where with their same motor, they can lift a little bit more. But, if I have an athlete that's like, I've got one guy now, he's 202 pounds, and we're looking to move him up to a 105 lifter in weightlifting, so 231. We're throwing a shitload of volume at him, and a bunch of food. We're looking to put on weight, and we're hoping that all that's good weight. He can handle more volume right now, and we're going to put that volume to use by hopefully growing some more muscle tissue, which then later, once we have it, now we will take that muscle tissue and attack it with heavier weights and try and make it, take that new motor and make it efficient.
Right. Although it's scary, I would think there is at least a tendency to progress upward through weight classes. I mean, if you knew, right? Imagine when you started, if you could go back in time and say, I'm going to compete in 242 or 275. I mean, I know guys fluctuate, they can jump back and forth a little, but from the, square one, if you knew you were going to be in that same weight class your entire life and never become a bigger man, bigger person because of the lifting, that would be a little depressing, I would think.
When I started getting serious about lifting, I was 165 pounds. I had dropped down from 3-something, the big fluffy 3-something, but my first goal, I lost weight. Now I got into lifting. I was 165 pounds. I am today 100 pounds heavier than that.
Right.
But I'm a different 100 pounds, and I've done, I began lifting in competition. I was 208 pounds. And then slowly over the years, now I'm 220. Now I'm 242. Now I'm 275. I slowly went up weight classes as I peaked out. And, I hit the longest one that I stayed in, and I stayed too long, I think, was 242 class. I fought to stay there, and my strength stagnated. And everybody's different than that. I know some lifters can stay light and keep making progress, but other body types and people just, their best way to move up and get stronger, even pound for pound, is gain some body weight.
Yeah. Let me throw out one last one because we're just about out of time. So anyway, let me recap the toxin buildup idea. I think that came out of a ignorant, but you know what? Let's face it. A lot of those science questions, they stem from something, right? There's a workout stimulus. What is it that caused the growth? As opposed to now that we know a little bit more about how, what the relationship is between mechanical tension and getting the nucleus in a cell to send out a message, for more actin and myosin or whatever. But not completely bogus either. Again, free radical generation and stuff. It's probably still part of that process. Now, what about pre-exhaust? What are your thoughts about this? Because this was over-espoused, in my opinion, back in the 80s. There's lots of different. There's actually a couple different ways to even define this. But do you ever have someone pre-exhaust either a muscle the idea here would be either do some type of almost accessory type movement to make a muscle very tired so it forces the other muscles in the lift to take up more of the load. Let's say pre-exhaust your chest so your benching does more for your triceps. But there's other ways to define this too. But do you see any role in this kind of thing?
No, I think it's changed some. I think there's some, I would never have anybody do a crap load of leg extensions, wear their quads out so their freaking hamstrings work more.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we might do, especially glute work and things like that, more, I would call it activation, not exhaustion.
Okay.
Do a couple sets of something to get this muscle group awake, and that's, I guess it's more of a warm up than it is an exhaustion. Let's get your glutes warmed up. Let's get your quads. Let's get everything warmed up, the ones we want firing, and now let's do the big move type of thing.
Okay.
But not to exhaustion, so where something else takes over. That's just, in the people I work with and the way I train people, that's just dangerous.
Right. There's the related idea, and again, because I think some of these old concepts got bastardized because it wasn't really systematically written down and published and progressed, like in the literature kind of thing. But some people would pre-exhaust, like let's say they'd pre-exhaust their pecs, thinking that when they went to bench press, now their pecs would have to work that much harder and activate more motor units and grow even more. And I'm like, well, wait, that's the opposite of what some other people are doing this for, which is to exhaust the pecs. Now they're out of the loop, and their triceps or their deltoids are taking more of it. So there was even confusion over some of that. And anyway, that was one of the old school principles I remember reading about as a kid that I would never do. I've done very little of that kind of stuff. So.
Well, I got one last one that is very prevalent right now, and it's do more work over a given time frame. Which is both good and bad. Mm-hmm. It's gotten very popular with the CrossFit community. Basically, here's your work, here's a set of the time. Let's AMRAP this thing and see how much you can do. It's great to a point. If we set a couple exercises and say, okay, now while keeping form, we're going to try and do these exercises and see how much we can do. And next time we will try and increase that a little bit, with the caveat that your form has to stay good. If you're doing that, great.
Right.
The problem arises when you're going to reach a point where the only way to get better is that you lose technique and you do it in shit form and try and rush through reps.
Which
that's
happens.
not improvement.
Right.
Yes, that's not improvement. That's just doing more crap in a given amount of time and risking injury.
Bouncing and twitching, like an idiot.
Yes. And there's a place for that, and you're starting to see, like, my buddy Brian out in California, he runs Hercules CrossFit, and he's very much pushing a don't go all out. He does his stuff at like 80%, and he tries to make his 80% output better over time.
That seems logical, though. Right.
And then, there's a time and place for competition. It's at competition. That's when you go all out. That's when things count. And that's when, I tell my powerlifters this, it doesn't matter. Like, we're looking for perfect form, but come meet day, you do whatever the hell it takes to pick the bar up.
Right.
If you end up losing form a little bit, fine, but we've practiced perfect form, so we hope that when you hit that super maximal, what was hopefully was 110%, you're able to do it in close to perfect form.
Right, you'll default to it. To the correct.
We've trained enough perfect form that hopefully that's what we hit. But if you miss that a little bit and still make the lift, great. It doesn't matter. You made it. That's our goal.
Well, let me offer this too. That from the sort of textbook side is, this is just another way to do overload. Right,
Mm-hmm.
Power is defined as work over time. Mm-hmm. Right, and if you can do those 30 repetitions of squat in 45 minutes, and you used to take you an hour, that is more powerful, right?
Yeah.
So and again, I feel like we need to define these things, because what you just said about the 80% loads, that makes some sense. There's going to be a sweet spot for maximizing power, and it's not going to be with the absolute heaviest load. It's not going to be the absolute lightest load either, though, because then you're moving practically an empty bar, and who cares? So again, this is, to me, it's the overload principle, and power, doing more work over time is the concept. This is not new, and again, with the sort of, you're right, it gets kind of rebranded or maybe just popularized. It's probably like fashion. Things come and go.
But the thing is you have to have a template. You have to have not only the load, but how the move is done. If all of a sudden you've changed the move and you did 67 reps that look totally different, look like crap, that's not the same.
It's not the same.
You didn't do the same work in the same amount of time as you did before. If you did, let's say I went in and I did push-ups, sit-ups, and chin-ups, and I did them in perfect form, and then next time I come in and I blow that out of the water, I do double the amount of work, but most of it looks like crap, and I'm, it's not that it's apples and oranges.
Right. It's not overload in that same way.
You would have to increase the work in the same perfect form over time.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, that's got to be the control variable there, right?
Yes.
You can't actually do what's essentially a different movement and
Yes.
claim that you've overloaded the power of that whole
Yeah.
system. You know.
So,
No, good stuff. All right,
Yeah.
just thought it'd be fun. Talk about old stuff and new. Listeners, if you have any ideas, because there are so many, right? And let's face it, Phil and I usually sit down and talk about this for all of 5 minutes maximally before we do something like this. So there's some really good ones. If you can think of something that was espoused in the old days, even some of the nutrition stuff that got tossed around, send us an email. You can go to ironradio.org and fire an email. Rob is really good about getting those to me, or post something on the Facebook listeners page. We'll comb that, sometimes about any kind of old principles. Which ones apply and which ones no longer apply. It's just fun. All right.
have a good week, everybody.
Hey listeners, have you seen the store at ironradio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowery, and they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store, Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the store, so we try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.